Hello everyone and welcome to this Room 2003 Science homework video. This video covers analyzing atom or ion notations and it is for my physical science class. In my physical science class we have been writing atom or ion notations from drawings like so. So we have a drawing that represents an atom or an ion, and by counting up, by analyzing the number of protons, the number of neutrons, and the number of electrons represented by the drawing, we can write the ion notation to match that drawing. So that's what we have done previously. For this homework, we are going to complete a data table using only the atom or ion notation, a periodic table if need be, and the skill we have already developed from the work we have done writing notations from the drawings. So we are going to have a notation. We're going to have the periodic table if we need one. And we're going to fill in this data table that breaks down the Z, the A, the net charge, and the number of subatomic particles. So how will we proceed through the rest of this video? Well, we're going to set up the data table first, make sure we have that on hand. Then we are going to complete 3 examples. Then following those examples, you are going to have 10 homework problems to complete. As far as the assignment specs, the homework is due April 22nd. And what I want you to do is take a picture of the completed data table and send me a picture of that work. I will check that work in, give you a completion grade on it, and then depending on what I see for the results, once I get the homeworks in, it'll depend on that will determine what we do as far as follow-up activity. So April 22nd is the due date. Send me a picture like you have been doing, and then we will that will determine what the follow-up activity is. So let's get started. Let's set up the data table. You will need a piece of paper and something to write with. This would also be a good time to take out your periodic table if you have it. If not, I have one in the slide. And your data table needs to look something like so. It'll have the names up top here, the name of the assignment, and your name. Please don't use D. Wells unless that's your name. You will have 7 data columns. You will label those columns using the first row, the header row, and then you will have rows for data. Now, if you plan to record the 3 examples as we work through them, you will need 13 rows. If you are only going to record the homework, you need 10 rows. I encourage you to record the examples, but that's up to you. So let me clear this stuff out of the way and pause the video now and finish setting up the data table, and then we'll get into the examples. So pause it now. All right, let's get to our first practice problem. Here is our first notation, and we are recycling the very first one we start out with, or that we saw in the earlier slide. Here's our data table. So let's plug in what we can from the data table and see whether or not we need a periodic table. Or let's plug in what we can from the notation. All right, the element symbol, we've got capital F in the notation. The Z we know is the lower left number, that's 9. The A is the upper left number, or 19, and the net charge is the upper right number, which is -1. Now, because we know that Z is the number of protons, we know the number of P is also 9. We know that we can find the number of neutrons by subtracting Z from A. So A minus Z equals the number of N. 19 minus 9 equals 10. And because the net charge is -1, we know we have one more electron than proton, one more negative charge than positive charge. Since we have 9 protons, that means we have 10 electrons. So when we have the full notation, we can fill out the complete line on the data table without referring to the periodic table. Pause the video now if need be to make sure you understand this example before we move on. Example number 2. Here is our ion notation, and we know it's an ion because -2, there's a charge, that means it's an ion. Here also is our handy dandy data table. Now as we get started, right away you've noticed there is no Z value. So laying that aside for a moment, let's fill in as much of the data table as we can, and then we will come back and see if we can figure out the Z. Element symbol wise, we know the element symbol is capital O for oxygen. The Z, again, we do not know, so we just have to put a question. I'm putting a question mark there for now. You leave that blank if you're filling it in, but we'll come back to it. The A, upper left, is 17. The net charge, -2. And again, we don't know the P, the number of P, because we don't know Z. And because we don't know number of P, we cannot solve number of N, number of E just yet. What we do know is this element symbol. And what we know about the element symbol is that it is on the periodic table. And not only is it on the periodic table, but the Z is on the periodic table with it. So because we know the element symbol, all we have to do is look it up on the periodic table, and right above it on this version of the periodic table is the Z. So with this information in hand, let's head back to the data table. So now that we know the Z, we can plug that in. It's 8 for oxygen. Z equals the number of P. So we have 8 there. The number of N is equal to A minus Z. 17 minus 8 is 9. And the number of electrons, again, we have a negative ion. It has 2 more electrons than protons, 2 more negatives than positives. We have 8 protons, so that means we have 9, 10 electrons, 2 more electrons than protons. Pause the video at this point to make sure you understand this one, and then come back and we will move on to the third example. All right, example number 3. One of my favorites, a little curveball here. We do not know the element symbol, but I'm going to guess that that's not going to be a problem for us. So let's fill in as much of the data table as we can. Element symbol, we don't know it. So for you, that's going to remain blank. I'm going to put a question mark there for me. What about the Z? We know the Z. It is 6. The A, we also know, is 13. The net charge, -4. Now, because the Z is 6, the P is also 6. They are equal. The number of neutrons is equal to A minus Z. 13 minus 6 is 7. And we have another negative ion. This time it has 4 more electrons than protons, 4 more negatives than positives. We have 6 protons, 4 more than 6 is 10. So we have 10 electrons. We know all that, even though it seems like the biggest part of the notation is missing. We can fill in all the data table except for the element symbol. What will we do? Well, let's head back to the handy dandy periodic table. Because we know the Z, all we have to do is look up the 6 and we will know the element symbol. Now, what's convenient about the Z is they go in order. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ah, there it is. There is the Z, 6, and there is the element symbol we need. So with this information in hand, let's head back to the data table, and we can fill in the element symbol with a capital C. Pause the video at this point if need be, and make sure you understand this one before we move to the homework problems. All right. Just one more kind of summary slide before the homework problems. Here is what we have completed so far. Again, this would be a great point to pause the video and just make sure, if you didn't record this data, that at least you make sure you understand how we plugged everything in. So if you would like to, pause the video and take one more look before we go to homework. All right, let's head to the homework problems. Now it's your turn. I handwrote these, and I realized after I handwrote them that this was a little mysterious here. So on number 3, the A for number 3 is 77. The Z isn't a whole lot better, but it should be 37. So it's your turn to analyze these ion notations. You will need your data table, and ideally you've got your copy of the periodic table that you can lay out next to your phone or computer so that you can see the problems and periodic table. If not, here is a periodic table on slide 15. So you might have to do a little bit of periodic table, rewind, periodic table. So I'm going to pause for a moment and create a space for you to pause video, and then I will turn to the periodic table and do the same thing. All right, that's it for this homework video, analyzing atom or ion notations from room 2003 Science at the Buffalo campus of Mideast Career and Technology Centers. And again, this is for my physical science class. As always, until we get to see each other again, please be safe and be well.